Welcome to Keep It Electric, episode 58. Today's recording falls on Friday, October the 11th, right in the heart of a very exciting MLB postseason. Probably one of the most exciting ones I've seen in a while, but also, I haven't watched a couple of them in the last couple of seasons due to, the Mariners' exit, either them leaving early or them not making it at all. If you haven't been paying attention, I'm going to catch you up on a couple of key developments really quick. The Mets are staying hot. They pulled off an upset over the Phillies. Mets fans will probably say it's not an upset, but most people will say that this was probably an upset. The Phillies just didn't look right in the series, and the Mets took full advantage. The Yankees did what they do best. They took care of business, beating the Royals and moving on to the next round. All eyes are on tonight's game between the San Diego Padres and the Los Angeles Dodgers. They're tied at 2-2. The stakes couldn't be any higher with the winner of this game punching their ticket to the NLCS, where they'll face those hot Mets. On the other side, we have the Guardians and the Tigers squaring off tomorrow to see who gets to face the Yankees in the ALCS. Now, let me say this. This postseason, it's been wildly entertaining. The showmanship, the grit, and the sheer gamesmanship in the National League have been on another level. Outside of the instant classic between the Guardians and the Tigers on the AL side, I've honestly been a little underwhelmed by the American League playoff action. It's starting to feel more like this year's World Series champ is coming out of the National League, and I hate to say it, but look at how these teams are shaping up. The Phillies didn't play great, if I'm being real, but any of those four remaining NL teams could probably beat the AL winner as things stands right now. The Yankees, Aaron Judge hasn't exactly been the powerhouse we're used to seeing this postseason. And don't even get me started on Jazz Chisholm Jr. I love the guy. I'm on record saying he's one of my favorite players in the league, but he's done more talking than playing. He's embracing that villain role, talking trash about the Royals and their fan base, but he hasn't backed it up on the field at all, or even in the batter's box. Hopefully he will show up in this next series, but right now, honestly, Jazz Chisholm Jr. is the biggest disappointment. Also, we got a steal from Giancarlo Stanton. He stole a base, so that probably is the other big highlight coming from the AL side. Judge has been quiet, at least in terms of talking trash. He doesn't talk that much, but he's also not dominating the way we've seen before. So the American League, quite frankly, just doesn't have the same fire this postseason, which makes it kind of a really interesting playoff landscape. It just seems like whoever's coming out of the AL is just going to get steamrolled by whoever's in the NL. So let's move on to today's episode, like the meat of it. Today marks the beginning of a new segment that I've been doing with, though I haven't really quite settled on a name yet, so let's just call it Unit Performance Grades for now, because that's exactly what they are. Each week, I'll be breaking down and analyzing the performance of different positions on the Mariners' Major League roster, and at the end of each segment, I will slap a grade on the unit for the 2024 season. We're going to dive deep, looking at both individual contributions and overall impact on the field. Now, for today, I'll be kicking off the series with first base. It's a position that's raised more than a few questions this past season. After all, it's been kind of a revolving door this year. Several players sharing time there, and the results have been kind of a mixed bag. So first base, in my opinion, stands out as one of the more pressing areas in need of improvement, not just because of who's been playing there, but because of the broader infield issues that have plagued the Mariners all season long. So let's just be honest, the entire infield could use some work. There's some serious gaps that I think we'll need to address in the offseason, and that's what makes first base a great starting point for this discussion. Positions like catcher and center field, we already know, that's obvious. This obviously is going to be there. Those are set it and forget it positions. So those spots don't carry the same drama that's going to be swirling around the Mariners infield situation. So in this episode, we're going to zero in on what went right, what went wrong at first base. Did we get the production we needed from our players at that position? Should the Mariners be looking to make a move and bring in a new face? Or is there enough potential in-house to promote from within? Could bringing back a familiar face even be on the table? That's where we're headed for this episode, an in-depth look at this past season, some analysis on where we can improve, and a few ideas on what's next for this crucial spot in the lineup. So without further ado, let's dive into it. All right, so let's unpack this revolving door at first base. It was a season-long storyline and a position that really felt unsettled. First base is a crucial position for any team. It anchors the infield, often provides power, and it is expected to handle some serious defensive responsibilities. For the Mariners, it's been a mixed bag of underperformance patchwork solutions, band-aids, temporary fixes, and just potential. So let's just start with the former mainstay. We started the season with Ty France as the clear leader. He logged 87 starts at first base. Now, we all know what France is capable of. He's been a consistent bat in the past, but this season, the season before that, he continued to underperform. His numbers at the plate dipped. He wasn't that clutch guy that we were used to seeing. The struggles were noticeable. Defensively, it became clear that mobility was becoming an issue for him. The problem wasn't really his glove. It wasn't ever his glove, but his range and overall ability to cover ground. France just didn't seem mobile enough to play the position the way that the Mariners needed, and that was a huge issue at first base. He statistically lost us games. His fielding wasn't what it needed to be, and unfortunately, that took a toll on the overall infield defense in general. Next came Luke Raley. Luke Raley started 41 games at first. This is a guy who's got pop. When he's locked in, he can really drive the ball, and it's exciting to see that kind of power in the lineup. But with Raley, the question really becomes, is he a long-term solution at first base? I don't think so. Defensively, there were concerns. Raley is fast, and his athleticism, like watching him play the position, left me with mixed feelings. There were moments where it seemed like his speed was getting him into trouble. Balls were slipping under his gloves that he was diving for. That some of those balls would have probably gotten past anybody, to be honest. He's just so fast that he was able to make a play or try to make a play, but most of the time the ball just seemed to be getting past him. There is a case to be made that he is a defensive liability at first. That's a little concerning, especially for a position that demands more reliability. So I don't think he is the fix. We also saw Justin Turner step in after the Mariners brought him in at the trade deadline. He started 31 games. Turner brings a wealth of experience to the table, but let's be real, first base is not his natural spot either. He spent most of his career as a third baseman and a designated hitter. The Mariners slotted him in at first to bring some balance to the lineup. I believe the Blue Jays used him that way as well. I can respect his presence and his versatility, but at the end of the day, Turner is a short-term fix. He's not a permanent answer. He's a 40-year-old veteran, and he performed admirably, especially with his bat. This move was more about plugging holes than building for the future. Then we have the future. That's the wild card, Tyler Locklear. I'm a fan of Tyler Locklear. He appeared in 16 games this season. To me, I think he's the most exciting option the Mariners have at first base long term. He's super raw. He really only hit 156 in those 16 games, but I don't think that we should rush to judgment when it comes to him. We've seen flashes of brilliance from him. He hit 2 homers when he was on the main roster. He stole a base. A glimpse of power that makes him a real prospect for the future. The key here is consistency and giving him enough reps to truly see what he's capable of. Now, I know some people might be thinking his numbers weren't great, and you're right. But let's not forget about the context. The entire team was struggling during his second stint in the majors. The Angels dominated us at home, and the stretch where Locklear was given the most playing time was not favorable because everyone else was also underperforming. So I think this is a guy that has shown promise, and I think with more development and opportunities, he could grow into a permanent fixture at first base. I was honestly surprised the Mariners didn't commit to him more after moving Ty France. Now, we also saw guys like Dylan Moore and Jason Vosler and Josh Rojas step in to cover first. Moore always provided utility and versatility. He played 11 games at first base. I think we can all agree he's not a long-term solution there. He's incredibly valuable as a super utility guy, but first base isn't where he makes his mark on this lineup and in this roster. Similarly, Vosler and Rojas both provided depth in a few games, but again, they were just temporary fill-ins, not everyday first basemen. So what does this tell us? It's clear that first base has been a bit of a weak spot for the Mariners this year. France, Raley, and even Justin Turner haven't fully locked down the position in a way that instills confidence for the long haul. And while Tyler Locklear shows promise, he's still unproven at the big league level. Looking ahead to the 2025 season, the Mariners could either continue to develop Locklear or look to free agency for a more established option. Here's where it gets interesting to me. The 2025 free agent class for first baseman is actually kind of stacked. We're looking at names like Paul Goldschmidt, Pete Alonso, Reese Hoskins if he decides to opt out. Anthony Rizzo's got a club option. Josh Bell, Rowdy Tellez, Christian Walker, Ryan O'Hearn, and then there's the vet Carlos Santana. They're all going to be on the market. Santana, of course, already spent a season with Seattle, and there's been some chatter about potentially bringing him back. His veteran presence was missed in the clubhouse after he left, but the Mariners have also enjoyed the impact that Justin Turner has had on the team. Turner himself has also expressed interest in coming back next year. He's also confirmed saying that he's going to play next year. He was quoted saying, "I've talked to a lot of guys and I really enjoyed my time here. I would love to be back and be a Mariner." That's a great sentiment, but Turner is again turning 40 in November. And while he put together a solid season, he ranked in the top 10 in batting average and on base percentage of qualified first basemen. The question really remains, is he a full-time solution for first base? So if Turner does come back, I expect it to be on a salary-friendly deal and in a role where he shares time with someone like Tyler Locklear at first. This could be the perfect blend of veteran leadership and youthful upside. Turner's experiences and his knowledge, especially when it comes to hitting approaches, could be invaluable for a young player like Locklear. Imagine the potential growth that we could see if those two share time together next season. Overall, it's clear that first base is still a work in progress for the Mariners, but there are exciting possibilities ahead, whether it's through further development of prospects like Locklear or an offseason acquisition. The Mariners do have options. One thing for sure is first base will be a focal point of discussion heading into the 2025 season. A possibility that, while unlikely, still has to be discussed would be Pete Alonso. Alonso is an absolute powerhouse, and we've all seen what he's been doing in the postseason. His bat is on fire, and his price is only getting steeper as he continues to perform at such a high level. That kind of production is rare, and the Mets understandably want to keep him. They've gone on record saying that they're interested in locking him down long term. But here's the catch. Alonso might want to test free agency and test his worth. And if he does, the Mariners could explore that option, but it's going to cost them. In fact, it's going to cost them a lot if he comes to Seattle. So let's break it down. Alonso is a slugger, the kind of guy that gives you 40-plus home runs a season. But there's a caveat when it comes to Seattle. T-Mobile Park is notorious for being tough on hitters, particularly for guys with Alonso's profile. He's a righty. This is a park that's friendlier to gap hitters than it is to power guys and friendlier to lefties. And Alonso's raw power, it will probably take a hit if he spends half of his season hitting in Seattle. Could he adjust? Sure. But to lure him to Seattle, the Mariners would likely have to overpay. Alonso's resume looks a lot better in hitter-friendly ballparks, and you can bet teams like the Cubs or even the Tigers. Hell, I don't think the Yankees will make a play for him, but the Yankees could. They have enough money. The Cubs have cash to spend, and Detroit could be an interesting dark horse. The reason why I say Detroit is I feel like they really should probably put something together around Tarek Skubal and some of the young talent that they have. So I wouldn't be surprised if Detroit really does try to make a splash at Alonso, even though they have Spencer Torkelson over there. Now, don't get me wrong, I can see Seattle making a phone call just to test the waters with Alonso's camp. Maybe they even throw an offer on the table. But if I'm being real with you, I don't expect a serious push from the Mariners for Pete Alonso. It just doesn't feel like their style right now, and the market competition might steer him towards a larger market team where his power numbers can shine without T-Mobile's pitcher-friendly dimensions working against him. Now let's shift to a much juicier topic. The idea of trading for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Now, before you get too excited, let me say that this is a bit of a reach in my opinion, but let's talk about it. The Mariners and Blue Jays have some history of trading with each other. Teoscar Hernandez, Jimmy Garcia, and even Justin Turner all came over in recent years. If the Jays are looking to move a star, Seattle could be a logical landing spot. That's who they turn to when they want to dump some salary, especially if Toronto doesn't plan to extend Vladdy long term. And from what I'm hearing out of Toronto, ownership seems to be a little lukewarm about giving Guerrero that massive contract extension he's inevitably going to be able to command. So it's in their best interest to it's in their best interest to explore moving him sooner rather than later, especially if they're looking to avoid letting him walk for nothing in free agency. If they do put Guerrero on the market, Seattle should absolutely inquire, but this won't come cheap either. So what would Seattle have to give up? The first thing Toronto is going to ask for is probably pitching. They'd love to pry one of our valuable arms like Logan Gilbert or George Kirby, but I think Seattle will just immediately hang up the phone if the Blue Jays decide to mention anyone from their current starting rotation. That's the foundation of this team, and they're not going to move the rotation for a 1-year rental like Guerrero, as talented as he is. Could they entertain moving Luis Castillo? Maybe. But that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The Jays would be trying to dump salary, and Castillo is set to make $21 million next year. So taking on that kind of contract isn't aligned with Toronto's goal if they're trying to shed payroll. And frankly, if Seattle does plan to move Castillo at some point, it'll be for a different piece, not for Vlad. That brings us to the next logical trade chips, prospects. Now let's talk the names. First up, I think Harry Ford. Harry Ford is an exciting young catcher with tons of upside, tons of athleticism. If the Mariners are committed to Cal long term, which they should be, Ford kind of becomes expendable, especially if they don't want to convert him to another position. For a player of Guerrero's caliber, it's hard to imagine this trade getting done without including someone like Harry Ford in the package. Another name that could be floated is Michael Arroyo. Arroyo is fluid between second base and shortstop, and his bat is already showing promise as well. And when you look at the Mariners pipeline, guys like Cole Young, Ty Pete, and Felton Celestin, all who are fluid between second base and shortstop, they make Arroyo somewhat expendable in a deep infield of prospects. And for someone like Vlad Jr., Arroyo could be a key piece for that deal. Now, let's keep in mind this is a 1-year rental that we're talking about, so I don't think the Mariners throwing everything at Toronto for that. A package including Ford and Arroyo is a possibility, but even then, the Mariners would have to consider whether they're willing to spend that much on a player that they're probably not going to extend. At the end of the day, I think the idea of trading for Guerrero Jr. is tantalizing, but ultimately a long shot. Seattle's front office has been more conservative when it comes to pulling the trigger on massive trades like this one, especially over the last couple seasons. And while they do have the capital to make it happen, the question is whether they see Guerrero as the right fit for their timeline and their payroll structure, which is why I think that they're probably not going to make this deal. It's also worth mentioning that while the Mariners' infield isn't in great shape right now, particularly at first base, they may want to develop their prospects internally rather than ship them out for a short-term solution. Seattle's farm system is loaded, and they could have future stars wearing Mariners uniforms sooner rather than later. The risk of moving guys like Ford or Arroyo could come back to haunt them if Guerrero walks after one season without a championship to show for it. In conclusion, while Pete Alonso and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. are fascinating names to think about, both feel unlikely for Seattle's current approach. Alonso's price would be too steep in free agency, and Guerrero would cost, his price would be too steep in prospects. So could the Mariners make a move for a top-tier first baseman this offseason? Kind of, sure. But the more realistic scenario is that they continue to explore trades and short-term solutions, waiting for one of their own to develop into the next cornerstone for the franchise. All right, so I'm going to bring this thing home and wrap this all up here. I think with all that's been said so far, the long-term strategy for the Mariners, in my opinion, should be a combination of re-signing Justin Turner for a veteran-friendly salary and pairing him with Tyler Locklear. That should be the long-term strategy. I would love to see Turner and Locklear spend an entire season together at first base. Turner brings that steady veteran presence. He may be turning 40, but he's still productive with the bat and is known for his leadership in the clubhouse. That kind of experience can be invaluable for a young guy like Locklear. And for Locklear, he's shown flashes of potential, but I don't think 16 games is nearly enough to really judge what he can do at the big league level. I think we should be giving him a longer leash. So letting Locklear take his lumps, get consistent reps, and face major league pitching on a regular basis will tell us what kind of player he truly is. I think we should give him a full season audition. And yes, there's probably going to be some growing pains that come with that, but that's part of the development process. So if by the All-Star break, I know I just said full season audition, but let's just think about it here. At the All-Star break, if Tyler Locklear proves to be a liability, whether it's at the plate or in the field, then that's the time where we should explore an upgrade. But I don't think the first base position is going to be the reason why we lose games next year. It wasn't the reason for the second half of this year for why we lost games. So let's talk about that. What we saw this season, specifically moving away from Ty France. I know, he's a crowd favorite. I know it was a bit of a shocker at first, but when you look at the numbers, it was the right move. France was just not the same player he had been in previous years. Offensively, he wasn't delivering, and defensively, it was even worse. He actually had a negative defensive wins above replacement rating at first base. You simply cannot have that kind of liability at such a crucial position, especially when the bat also isn't there to offset it. What's wild is that after France left, both Justin Turner and Luke Raley stepped in and actually produced positive wins above replacement. Turner wasn't even known for his glove at first, but his bat carried him and he was solid. Raley, meanwhile, showed that he could be productive, but let's be honest, I think he's just better suited for the outfield. His best games came when he was in those corner outfield spots, and I think that's where he should stay, and maybe splash him in on first base when you really, really need it. So if I'm giving the first base unit for the 2024 season a grade, I'm giving it a solid C, and I was close to giving it a C plus when you consider how well Turner played down the stretch and how Rayleigh's power really started to emerge down the stretch. But overall, I think it was just an average unit, and that's okay. It's okay that it was average. Sometimes you don't really need an elite player at every position to win games. It's really about balance. So I think we got decent production from a mix of guys at first base after we moved away from Ty France. I would like to see a full season of that. Now, I do think that Luke Raley, again, should stay in the outfield full time. That's where he's been at his best. And it'll allow us to keep first base more focused. And that, to me, would open up the spot for Locklear to take the lion's share of games at first, with Turner rotating in and out as needed and also giving Turner the bat at DH. So the key point of this whole thing would be I wouldn't rush into a free agent signing or a blockbuster trade for first base this offseason. Let's see how Locklear handles the first half of the season. If by the All-Star break, it's clear that he's not ready or is struggling at first, then that's when we look to make a move. Free agent dollars should be spent wisely, and first base isn't the position that I think we need to splurge on right now. Not when we have internal options like Locklear, who just need a little bit more time. And then when you think about it, the Mariners are not going to lose games because of their first base position or their first base situation next year. The issues we had in 2024 weren't only like the glaring hole at first. It was a team-wide struggle that needs tweaking here and there, in my opinion. Ty France was just a minor tweak that worked in our favor when you really look at it. So my plan for first base is pretty simple. Let Locklear develop, sign Turner for one more year to guide him, and don't waste resources on a short-term rental like Guerrero. Give Locklear the opportunity to show what he can do. If he's still struggling halfway through the year, then we reassess. But in the meantime, we focus on areas where upgrades are more pressing and let this young talent grow into the player we hope he can be. 2025 could be the year where Tyler Locklear finds his stride, and if not, we'll have the flexibility to make moves when the time is right. But as of now, I am all in on a Turner-Locklear combo. Stay tuned because this offseason and next season are going to be crucial for shaping the future for the Mariners. Next up, we'll dive into the potential free agent targets that could strengthen other areas of this roster. Cough, cough, second base. So we're going to talk about second base in the next episode. I'll catch you there. Thank you for tuning in to Keep It Electric. Go Mariners.